Carla, anytime you're ready, over to you.
Okay, Russ, thanks so much. And hello to everybody, and welcome to the Federal Government Distance Learning Association's webinar series. I'm Carla Lane, FGDLA's Vice President of the Education Sector, and the moderator for today's webinar. FGDLA is a nonprofit professional association formed to promote the development and the application of distance learning in the federal government. We actively foster collaboration and understanding among those involved in leveraging technology and instructional media in support of the education and training needs of the federal government. Our membership is derived primarily from individuals employed by the agencies within the federal government. We invite you to join with us in this exciting field. Our web address is FGDLA, and you can find our membership information there as well if you'd like to join with us. There are no fees for joining. For upcoming events, on October 19th, we'll have a 2-hour workshop on microlearning by Kelly Barrett of the IRS. On November 16th, Sandy Wagner will discuss distance learning instructional strategies used by the Defense Language Institute's Foreign Language Center. On December 14th, Dr. Melissa Dickman will hold a 2-hour workshop on helping subject matter experts create strong courses when they have little to no background as an instructional designer. We are so proud that Zoom is a sponsor of FGDLA and has been instrumental in helping us present these webinars. We'd like to thank Zoom and Russ Colbert for sponsoring today's seminar. They are the best partners we could have, and they're one of the new and valued sponsors for FGDLA. Russ, thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Carla. It's an honor to be of service with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So today's topic is about implementing the 4 levels of gamification into learning experiences. We have an expert in this field, Dr. Jonathan Peters, who is the Chief Motivation Officer for Sententia Gamification. He's been one of our favorite speakers for the FGDLA Government Learning and Technology Symposium, GLTS, and for the FGDLA webinars. This discussion will focus on why and how to make gamification work for learning. Dr. Peters, welcome, and thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to regale us with today. Thank you.
All right. Oh, as always, it's great to be here. I'm going to switch my video. There we go. All right. So I can move around and gesture and people can actually see me that way. All right. So we're going to look at the 4 levels of gamification implementation. And I'm going to show on the next screen here what those are, but we have a little preamble before we get to those. So we're going to start with the cosmetic and end up with the reason for being. What I wanted to do before our session was to listen to how to pronounce that properly with a French accent, raison d'être, but I did not take the time. So before we get started though, let's think about, get our minds in the game space. So what I want you to do, let's do this in the Q&A, because it'll be fun so that you can see it. In the Q&A, type in some games that you played as a child. So thinking back when you were a child, type in some of those games. So these are the ones that were around when I was a kid, so you can pretty much guess my exact age. So in the Q&A, if you would type in, what games did you play as a child? And while you do that, so Candyland, Monopoly, Life, Atari, Mario Brothers, great, Monopoly, Sonic the Hedgehog. Okay, good. And Jolly thanks for Kick the Can. So someone who actually got outside and played. So what we're doing here is I have a behavior that I would like you to do. So as the learners in this webinar, I would like you to be active and participate through this over the next 55 minutes or so. And so I'm going to put like light gamification, so cosmetic gamification in this. If you put something in, and you still can, if you put something in, I'm going to give you a badge. So you can grab this badge, player's badge. You can take a screenshot, draw a picture of it, and keep track of it. Now, for a lot of you, these are really coming in good. So for a lot of you, badge is fun in and of itself. But for some of you, it's like, not so much with the badges. So I'm going to add another mechanic in here. I'm going to add a win state. So if you collect the badges, and you email me, which I'll share my email. Well, there it is right there, bighead@sententiagames.com. If you email me your badges, or at least let me know how many you got, you have a win state. So I'm going to add a win state. So if you stay with us to the end, everybody on this webinar has a chance. So I'm adding the mechanic of chance to win a gamification certification. So the gamification of learning, this will be a surveyor badge. The value is it's actually $347. So I miscalculated that. So it's not quite as good of a deal.
Inflation.
But, yeah, exactly. So now we got a chance state, a win state, we got badges, and I'm going to add one more, a lose state. If you do not get at least 3 badges during our session time together here, you will lose the option. All right. So here's that badge again. You can take a screenshot, draw a picture, keep track of it, and then you'll see my email address again throughout the presentation. All right, so just as an example, let's move on to the next question I have for you. So also in the Q&A, let me go through this. What is your level of knowledge and experience with gamification? Put a 5 if you consider yourself a gamification master. 4 if you've done some points, badges, leaderboards, if you just some light gamification. If you've taken 3 if you've taken a previous course in design, gamification design, 2 if you've read a white paper, a blog, and a 1 if you heard the term and that's why you're here. So we got a 3. Thanks, Jerry. Joyce, Nate, welcome. And yeah, so good. So I have a slide for Nate and Joyce coming up. So good. Let's see who else we have. So we have some lots of folks starting out. Jerry's taken a course on it. And if you're putting stuff in the chat bar, hey Sean, good. If you're putting stuff in the chat bar, guess what? You get a badge, a Gamification Explorer badge. So again, take a screenshot, draw a picture, put a tick mark somewhere, keeping track. So that's 2 badges you could have gotten so far. All right. So for those of you getting started, there's different definitions of gamification. This is one that we like to use. So gamification is motivational design. So it's we want people to take an action to do something, and so we're using game mechanics to do it. Now, if you can anticipate that if you went to your boss, the higher ups, and said, hey, I want to try some gamification stuff, that they might say, oh no, we're serious people doing serious work around here. We don't pay them to have fun. If you switch the term to motivation design, one of our master craftsmen, that's someone who's gone all the way through our certification process, he's with a well-known pharmaceutical company. You might have, probably, if you've taken a vaccine, it's a 50-50 shot, you took theirs. And he had a lot of problems with the gamification, getting that sliding through. So he didn't change it to motivational design. He called it intrinsic motivation. So sometimes you have to get different words. Anyway, it's the use of game mechanics, and we'll talk about that. You'll see some examples, and the dynamics in a non-game context. So and that's important, in a non-game context. So if you can use this definition for those of you just getting started. Okay, so a little bit about me and how I got to gamification. I am an old professor, and so many of you on the webinar here are too young to know this, but the older you get, the younger college students get.
That as a compliment.
Exactly. Well, I can't see all the attendees, but I'm going to assume you don't know this, that those college students get young. So back in 2008, I said, I want to hang out with adults, professional adults. And so I signed up with this company that would send me around the U.S. to, eventually to Australia, giving their seminars. And I can still remember the first one. It was in front of 72 people. Now, I was a college writing instructor, and so I only had maybe 20, usually less than 25 students, because of the extra grading I would have to do. So 72 people is a lot of people for me. I show up that day and well, let me say it this way. Let me tell the story differently. So the first day was 72 people in Bakersfield, California, and the topic was business grammar. Now, there's 3 things wrong with that sentence. So in the chat bar, this is what I almost forgot. In the chat bar, put a 2 if you're, not chat bar, in the Q&A, I'm sorry. In the Q&A, put in a 2 if you're from Bakersfield, California, a 1 if you've been to Bakersfield, California, and a 0 if you have not been. All right, so do that now. So 2 if you're from there, a 1 if you've been, a 0 if you have not been. So the first thing there, which I started to say, is the 72 people, and I showed up and it was set for 50. So we had to rip out all the tables, put the chairs in what's called theater style, so they're going to have their workbook on their lap the whole day. What a pain that is. My first day on a microphone, we're testing the microphone after we're supposed to start. Everybody's just sitting there watching, get started about 10 minutes late. So very, very frustrating. The second thing wrong was Bakersfield, California. Let me see if anyone is from there. Nope. Okay, so a few of you have been. For those of you who have been, can we agree that the folks who haven't been don't need to put it on their bucket list? There's many beautiful places. Of course, the south of Bakersfield, California, you got you have Southern California, Northern California. Even got the Mojave Desert is nicer than Bakersfield. So not one of my favorite places. And the third thing that was wrong there was business grammar. So same thing in the chat. I can keep up with you here. In the chat, put a 1 if you liked English when you were in school, a 0 if not so much. Put a 1 if you liked grammar, a 0 if not, English if you liked English in school, and a 0 if not so much. Okay, yeah, got a few nerds. All right, like me. Okay, a few people like me. So, but you can imagine the attitude a person would have if their boss sent them to this one-day seminar. And so very, very resistant folks. So I knew something needed to change. We got started about 9. It was after 9, so let's say 9:10, and by 9:30 I looked up and I saw 72 versions of this, and I was like, something needs to change. Because as a professor, I was relatively popular, but I was giving my students exactly what they expected, and that's dry, boring lecture. And as adults, as professionals, we want something more. We want to be engaged. Well, first of all, want our learning to entice them. So what we want to do is set up the program so if they say, hey, what is that? That looks interesting. I want to play. Once they're here, we want to engage them through the use of game mechanics. We engage them in the learning, and then encourage them to take their learning to their workplace. So eventually, that's what brought me to Sententia, where I am now as the Chief Motivation Officer. And so anyway, for putting in your Bakersfield badge, you get the Bakersfield badge for letting me know if you've been there or not. So again, take a picture, you can do a screenshot, draw a picture, put a tick mark somewhere, and this is my email, bighead@sententiagames.com.
That's
all right.
The best email address in the whole world, by the way.
Yeah. At Sententia, we get to choose it. We had an employee, a great employee, who just moved on to other things. He chose to be scapegoat at. So, anyway, all right. So let's get into those 4 levels. And we're going to start with cosmetic. Now I'm going to pull back the curtain here, and cosmetic is when we have something, a training, a learning that's already in place, and then we just put something down on top of it. What I've done here so far is cosmetic. Right, so I set up a badging system. I set up a win state, a lose state, put in some chance, but the actual delivery is not that gamified. It's still me just talking at the camera, you sitting back there hiding where I can't see. And And so there's not really that involvement. You can be passive. I can't tell if you're looking at your email or whatever you're doing. So this is an example of cosmetic. And I want you to think about, first of all, how much you were participating in this. And by the way, I'm not shutting this down. You can still send me your badges to Big Head, and still send me your badges. But how involved did this badging system create for you? How encouraging, how enticing was this? If I were to keep going, because I'm not going to keep this up the rest of the webinar, how likely would this continue to be fun? How engaged would you be if I continued? So this is an example. This is what, if you remember, I said points, badges, leaderboards. If our LMS allows us to have a leaderboard or something, we just throw it in. It doesn't really do anything for the learning. It's not necessarily fun. It's certainly not fun over the long term. So again, this is an example of cosmetic, and we're going to stop it because I want to show you actual examples of where gamification has been successful. So the second one is accessory. So cosmetic, we're just throwing it on top because we can. I can have badges, we can do these things, but there's no real thought behind it. Accessory is when we want to help the learner learn. So using game mechanics to aid the learning process and or to see if learning has occurred. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here that we've run into. So the first is this one. This was a bank that is based in San Francisco. It's not a huge bank. It's mostly for investments. So it's just pretty much California, New York, Florida, I believe Chicago is where they have branches. So relatively small but prestigious. And it was one of those things that if you're an instructional designer, you've run into this at some point where someone higher up freaks out because people don't know something and they say, everybody has to take this training and blah, blah, blah. So same thing happened. A vice president was hanging around at on the sales floor and found out this one salesperson did not know about one of their products, one of their financial products. So he flips out, he says, everybody, all the salespeople have to come to San Francisco for a whole week. And the person in charge of the learning area, he went for 4 days. He would go through every product that they offer, and then on Friday they would take a test to see if they know and remember. And if they failed the test, they wouldn't get, their commissions would be reduced or whatever. So, but we worked with him. He brought us in to consult. He had to do it this certain way. All we could really do for gamification is to help people learn so that they could pass the test. So he took a map of San Francisco, not this map, but a map of San Francisco, and then for each tourist area in San Francisco, he talked about a product, so that when they took the test on Friday, they would remember, oh, the Golden Gate Bridge. So they could literally, in their minds, go through the map and say this product, this product, this product, this product. So it was an accessory to help them learn. So it was gamified that throughout the time, their experience, they would go to, not physically, they still sat in the classroom, they would go to each of the tourist areas and learn about a product. So again, just an accessory. It wasn't very in-depth. He was still essentially lecturing from the front of the room. They just had a map to follow through. And then there's this one. John Meehan was instructing teachers like before the class started. So about this time of year, so this would be continuing ed for teachers. And I'm going to show you the video here.
So we're having a Pokemon Pick'em. Teachers, yes, watch your heads. They're solving math problems in each of these Pokeballs. They're coming back, grabbing a new ball every time they solve a problem. How many can they solve? Look at all these people racing. 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes. Nice work. Get them sealed. Lock them up. Watch your heads, be careful. Yes. Great review activity, crazy energy. I love seeing people get fired up about learning. You can use this for any course or content area. I'm gonna get back to the game. More later.
So, John Mann, so these teachers are going through mandated training. They have to go through this training, and they have to take a test at the end. So this is an assessment that they have to take. Can you imagine your learners being that excited to take an assessment? So instead of, here's the assessment, you need to get 80 over 100, they have to run and see how many of these questions they can answer and answer correctly. And you can see the excitement just by gamifying an assessment. So again, not deep gamification, although John Meehan is very well versed in gamification, and it's just sitting there as an accessory. So accessory is different than integrated, and this is where, as a company, we start to get involved. So now it's not just something that's helping the learner out or making an assessment much more interesting. Now it's an integral part of the actual learning. So a little bit about us. We have 3 levels of certification. So the surveyor is the first level. This is what what you have the chance to win. and then of course up to master craftsman, which is a full deployment of a gamification product learning. So on the first one, the level 1, it goes through looking at our 30-step process for gamification. So it has a treasure map and all of those types of wonderful gamified things inside of it. So this is what you have the chance to win. Just email me what you got for your badges. But there we go. So we focus on the integrated, and then of course down to the 4, you can imagine we've gotten involved there. And I wanted to show you this one. So Brandon went through that surveyor course in September. Well, this is some time ago. It's before pandemic. And so he works he's also moved on for a timeshare company. So I don't have badges for this, but I guess if you can take one, declare one if you want. But put a 2 in the Q&A if you own a timeshare.
Or chat, Jonathan.
Or chat, okay.
Open. Uh-huh.
Chat's open? Okay. So let's do it in chat then. Make sure life a little easier. Okay. So 2 in chat if you own a timeshare. Put a 1 if you've gone through the pitch, but you didn't end up buying. And put a 0 if you haven't gone through the pitch. So let me swipe over to chat so I can grab that. And there it is. And so some folks own, and several of you survived, and some of you haven't. But so those of you who haven't, there's only a few of you gone through it. Just realize that the salespeople, it sounds like a good deal, right? But it sounds like a good deal, and they wear you down. They usually make the pitch right before a meal, so that you're like have a lot of pressure to do it and to actually sign up. So what they have to tell you, so you will hear it, but they gloss over it, and it is in the fine print. But after you purchase it, there's usually some sort of yearly fee, so like a maintenance fee or something. Sometimes that fee is actually larger than what you paid for your property. So anyway, Vistana, that bill is due at the first of the year, and so a lot of people are angry and upset. So what Vistana does is everybody who has a desk, so the L&D department, but not maintenance, not receiving, not janitorial service, landscaping, and so on, but everybody that has a desk answers angry calls from customers. So what you do for the month of January is you have to just pick up the phone and smile and have people yelling at you because they're upset. They didn't know about it. They didn't plan for it. They max out their credit cards over the holidays, and then suddenly this bill comes due. So because you're talking financing on the phone, you need to take an SEC training in November. And so he built this around the American holiday of Terry the Turkey. So the narrative of the story is Terry has lost his tail feathers. And he in Thanksgiving Woods. And your job is to pick up a tail feather. And if you can answer the question, great. If you can't answer the question, then you take the little training that goes along. And so it's very, very simple training. So before he created this, nobody wanted to take this training, this compliance training. It was boring. It doesn't change much from year to year. You don't want to be certified to be able to talk on the phone anyway. So how it worked is, like I said, you're going through the woods here, and you needed to get 22 of the tail feathers, 22 of the 25 tail feathers to pass. If you don't, Terry explodes right on screen. Terry goes on the screen. Extremely successful, 100% compliance. Everybody took it. Most people took it twice. And once, of course, to pass, but first to watch him explode. So all these people who didn't have time, that didn't want to do it, who were hugely resistant to it, suddenly, because of the narrative, because of the simple game mechanics that was part of the training, was integrated right into the training, was very, very successful. All right. Another one that I always like to show is this one by Tracy O'Connor. This was for an onboarding for customer service agents throughout the world for a large company. And what's interesting here was that the onboarding experience was 80 hours, and it was just click, 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 screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. They couldn't engage in the software. They couldn't do anything. They just sat passive for 80 hours. And the company was losing people. People couldn't make it through the 80 hours. They'd be like, ugh, I'd rather work at Taco Bell than go through this. So Tracy created this called Bring Jeff Home. Again, simple narrative. Jeff travels to Mars to see if he can open a warehouse and shipping facility there. One day, Jeff returns from gathering specimens to find his spaceship in shambles. Jeff will need to put his spaceship together so he can leave for home before he runs out of supplies. And so your job as the learner is to help Jeff get home. So the green represents how long he has supplies. The red is how much longer it'll take to get a spaceship together after he's run out of supplies. So this becomes a type of reverse progress bar. So there's different things. There was a spin the dial. There's solving scenarios. There were certain tools that would come along to help him speed up. And at the end, you'd get a badge that say, I've got Jeff home in however many days you did that. So you'd get a badge. So these little, I can't remember what they call them, but they had this badging economy at this company. And so these are really important for you inside the company. So, well, there it is. I got Jeff home. You get the congratulations. Here's your toolbox, and so on. So, again, successful. Now they have a mission. Now they have something to work on over those. And they did get the 80 hours down a little bit, but certainly not inside of a week. So again, some ideas here about integrating. The learning is sitting inside of the mechanics, the game play. Now, where we're going in gamification is going to be more of the reason for being, because of the technology as different XRs become more available. But I'm going to show you two examples that were fully immersive and they existed outside of XR. So yes, we will be getting there. VR will become more and more interesting. We have someone who's just went through our program. She's doing amazing. Her goal is to get school teachers to be using VR, and again, what she's producing is interesting. It's not quite to the level where we would be comfortable because it's still kind of cartoony, and so with adult learners, I'm not so sure. And we're getting there. We will be there soon. But in the meantime, we can still create immersive. So both of the examples I'm showing you were created in Storyline. So, in sitting on a LMS somewhere. So, this first one was is an academic one. So this was Professor Jim Egan from Brown University. And so he and his designer, or one of the designers of Brown, Naomi Perso, they went down to Florida to attend a live version of our level 1 certification. This, again, obviously before pandemic, and then they went through the certification process. And this is an example of what they came up with. I'm going to show the trailer here on the next slide.
Since long before recorded history, when humans first began to tell stories, we've asked ourselves a disarmingly simple, yet seemingly unanswerable question. What does it mean to be human? Meet Leila Kalami, an avid student of humanity who just happens to be from the distant planet Io and has traveled across the galaxy to find the answer to that very question. Join Leila and me, Professor Jim Egan, in Fantastic Places, Unhuman Humans, where we will attempt to answer the unanswerable by visiting exotic locales and encountering hybrid beings reachable only through the magic of fiction. With your weathered backpack in tow and me as your expert guide, we'll travel through 3 worlds and 6 realms, visiting universes called forth by such authors as Margaret Atwood, Edgar Allan Poe, and H.P. Lovecraft. You, Leila, and your fellow travelers from across the galaxy will enter the imaginative spaces of these works through a series of quests in which you use and develop your creative powers, critical thinking skills, and analytical abilities to convey to Leila the complexities, contradictions, and uncertainties that are at the heart of being human. We may never answer the question of what it means to be human, if there even is a distinctive thing that can be called human. But after fulfilling your final quest, you'll have a better understanding of the conceptual and ethical problems that arise out of any effort to represent our humanity. Leila came all this way. We should at least show her around, right? Register now for Fantastic Places, Unhuman Humans. Adventure awaits.
So some amazing things came out of this. First of all, if you're not familiar with Brown University, they have a different approach to higher ed. And so it's more learner driven. It's not you have to take these classes and so on. So this was obviously a literature course that he gave over the summer is how it was designed. And it was amazing how... So, and then the other thing they set up is you could still take it the old traditional way if it was still there. And or you could do all these extra things. And across the board, students did extra work just to stay engaged inside the program. In other words, you could test out. You wouldn't have to play along if you didn't want to. But yeah, most across the board, students chose the more difficult path to stay engaged inside the game. This changed the viewpoint for the provost of online learning, because the assumption was that people were too passive for online learning. And so this case study showed differently. They went on and created another program that was for literary criticism, which is not can get rather dry and boring for those of you non-English majors out there. Lit crit is one of those that you can really get bogged down in. And so they launched that in 2020, and so fortunately they were well in place for the pandemic, because it was already designed and developed and was out there. And then of course it was the mad scramble for those of you who remember everything we did at the beginning there when it came to throwing everything online. At least now they had stuff that people were engaged in. Next one I'm going to show you is one that we did for a company and recently, and so it's another video. I'll show you the video and then we'll talk about it and being immersive. Here we go. So
What does
again, the
music
idea
have with that, Jonathan?
it gets tiresome after a while.
I mean, it's hard not to pay attention because the music is so fetching, you know, it's.
Yeah, yeah. So the artist that we use often use the friend of his is the one that creates our videos. So the idea, the concept is that you, the learner, have to stop Dr. Lassitude. And so moving through this building, the office building, so first all you have to get in and you move through the break room, the library, and so on to different rooms. And so it becomes immersive in that thing. So it needed to be asynchronous. A lot of the learners are on they do their learning while doing transportation to and from work, and so it needed to be asynchronous, and so that's why we have they're called NPCs, non-player characters, as part of their team to defeat this evil genius. And then at the end of the program, you get there, you finally stop the virus. And then there was a teaser that the adventure might continue. So the company hasn't funded the next episode, but Dr. Lassitude escapes now to be in, I think he was going to end up in Central America, in a cave in Central America is where they would learn, where they would discover him next. So again, the idea is to be immersive inside of so the whole reason is, sometimes this might even be what we consider a serious game. It's not just gamification. This can actually move into a learning game at this stage because we're all the way in there and immersive. So computer's doing funny things right now, sorry. Okay. I don't know what showed up, if you saw anything on your screen. Adobe just decided, maybe I said Adobe too loud or something. Adobe was like, blunk. All right. So anyway, the point is, it's not necessarily good, bad. Certainly, like I said, we engage at the 3 and the 4.
Exactly, Jonathan. That was Zoom trying to erase your audio when you said that word.
Yeah, they were
exactly
conspiring against me. Oh shoot! The yeah, you have to be careful what a certain character's name starts with an A in the household, because if you say her name, suddenly things start happening. So anyway, for those of you getting started, you can experiment down at these lower levels, the 1 and the 2. It's not anything wrong with it. It's just how engaging will it be, and certainly over time. And so the reason to give you these different examples so that you can ideas to, hey, say this is possible. Like I said, both of those programs were sure the art. We happen to like Matt Rockman, so there is some art aspects of it. But so Brown was able to do it in-house, except for it's the same artist for both of them. We just, after we saw their program, we liked them, and so we hire them for hours. But the point is that that's the only outside monies that we had to spend was for the artist. Like I said, everybody else was in-house. And the same thing was with Brown. And to create something at a higher level than just something more simple. And the integrated ones, you have the skill sets, probably, if you're an instructional designer, to create any of the examples you saw there. Accessory, again, takes a little bit more thought, a little bit more understanding to create an assessment that's gamified. But you can even buy ready-made games that can do as an accessory. And then, like I said, cosmetic. Look how easy it was for me to give you some badges. So I spoke quickly enough to allow time for questions. And so how would they post those in the Q&A, I guess? People's questions? Probably be the easiest. So first of all, when you think about what you can do at work immediately, so starting to apply things. Now, one of you was at a level 4, so you're already out there working. So hopefully, by looking at this, you're starting to get some ideas. For those of you just getting started, join the conversation. Yeah, that's a good place to begin. In fact, I should invite you, email me. So every Friday night we have the Game Garage, and it's just a bunch of designers that get together, and we try and test different games. And so it's free. It's always free. This week, Zolt, I'm not going to get his last name, a well-known person, speaks at conferences quite a bit on gamification of design, and so he'll be leading it this week. So we always have something. Sometimes it's this last two have been free tools that we can use for gamification. So yeah, it's every Friday. So just email me. I'll make sure you get an invitation. Yeah, and Charlie's asking a really good question, and it's one that I can give you a simple answer, and then it gets really complex. So the purists, a purist in gamification says it's not a game. So we're literally just taking mechanics. So if you think of just like a loyalty program for an airline, that's gamified to get you building up points to get better access or cheap flights or something. So it versus a serious game. And then I'm going to take it one step further. Then there's also what's known as game-based learning. So serious games, game-based learning, this is an actual game that we get into. So it is a game. It looks, it feels, it's named a game. And so there's learning inside the game versus gamification is applying it on the outside, so like as cosmetic accessory and so on. Where it gets touchy is down here, and more so as we keep moving forward with technologies, the reason for being. I had a conversation yesterday with a cool company. It's basically we won't need instructional designers because it's so easy to plug and play with their tool, their platform, and it's going to begin to feel very game. It's going to feel like a game when we get into it. So at the surface, at the high level, I should say, gamification does not look, feel like a game. But like I said, once we get down to here, where's that line drawn? So, however that, to give you that answer. And so how much more motivation is there? Oh, good. Nate's asking about the motivation when it comes to rewards, and this is something I've spent a lot of time looking at and thinking about. So most game designers, so not just people in the field of gamification, are comfortable with keeping everything in game. So the rewards are always in game. And what we find is that when we start to give people things of value in the real world, deviant behaviors happen. We have this one case study of a conference that gamified the experience, and so it was virtual. This was during the pandemic, and so one of the things people could do is to build up points, and could build up points. So if you left a review for a session at the end of the set, or not the end of the session, if you just left a review, you would get certain points. Well, where things went awry is because the number one reward is worth thousands of dollars. And so the top three were all worth over $1,000, or maybe the third one was in the hundreds. And these group of ladies, they were all ladies, started to game the system. And what they did is that they would log into each of the sessions. So let's say there's 10 breakouts, they'd log into each one, leave a review. Obviously they didn't attend it. Obviously no learning was happening, and that was in their competition. So our thing is to really attempt to keep it all rewards inside the experience. We have worked with certain people that, the winner gets a small Starbucks card, Amazon card, or something like that. That's okay, but there's this thing called the magic circle. When in game design, we call it the magic circle. That once we step in, we feel like we take on the rules of that world, the game world. So anyway, as much as possible, we'll try and keep it in game. If we want to nerd out even more, we got a little bit of time here. I just read a paper was looking at the reward systems in people's brains. So people were sitting with a fMRI in an fMRI, and it was a very, very simple game. So it was the most boring game ever, but they would predict what the next number would be on the screen. So they'd predict if it was going to be higher or lower than a 5. So then it was going to be a number between 1 and 10, and they would predict whether it's going to be above or below a 5. So sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. And what he found out, though, what was fascinating was that they didn't need a reward system to stay engaged. It was the game mechanic of guessing and variable wins was extremely powerful and extremely engaging. People stayed with this stupid game all the way through. And one of the participants who wanted to ask the researchers if he could take the game home with him, and then the guy said, no, it's just sitting here on my computer. And the guy kept wanting it, and he said, well, you never said the wins and loses were determined. You were always going to win or lose. You weren't actually really guessing, because once you made your guess, then the computer would, because it was a study, and so everybody needed to have the same pattern of wins and losses to be able to study it. So anyway, that was motivation. So what else? What other questions might we have?
I've got one, Jonathan. I'm wondering about so many people, as you mentioned earlier on, administrators are against it, or they don't want to spend money to do it. So give us some language that helps people through that, gets them to the point where they would at least maybe consider doing some sort of a pilot or looking at things.
Yeah. There's increasing amount of evidence out there to show engagement, to show improved results. And so again, if you think back to the definition I gave, if we focus on motivation design to especially in engagement, we're able to show this. Do reach out to me, and I can give you some words and things to say. And because we're focusing on the motivation design, if you go out and you just look at research papers, unfortunately, what's out there is folks get an idea. Well, they're in grad school, and so they come up with an idea. They try something on fellow grad students or undergrads. So there'll be a course that's lightly gamified on the cosmetic side, and then one that's the traditional course. And then they look at it, and sure enough, the gamified ones are more engaged and so on. And then we look at the test scores. Test scores don't change much. So there are the research out there. On the other side of things, though, there is a significant amount to show how the game mechanic improves retention, engagement, and testing out. So it is focusing on the psychology of it more than saying, hey, we're going to make this fun. And that's the type of language that moves along. I've just been looking at some amazing results in the medical field where they need to retain information. So by this gamification, fewer incidences have happened and so on. So it's really getting that level of knowledge out there that people are doing this. In your field, if we can find, and I'm not saying everybody generally, but in your specific area, there probably are some good examples that exist. And so it's at this stage, enough gamification has happened that it's not easy, but the examples are out there. And if you could say, hey, look, this department or this company or this organization did this, and this was the result, then we can show it. Having said that, what happens is people generally aren't, how would I say this nicely, testing the right things or the behavior. So if we don't start with a baseline, how do we know someone's improved? How do we know they're better? So we need a baseline for that to happen. We just run into it all the time. A company will say, hey, we want behavior change, and say, great, what are they doing now? And they're like, I don't know. So we need to know what is the outcomes that we're wanting. Where are we now? What do we want the outcomes to be? But
The application is so important. Dr. Malcolm Knowles, the father of adult education in the United States, for anyone who hasn't heard about him, always felt that just telling people what was happening or the content delivery wasn't enough. You always had to move everything over to the point where people could actually apply that. So in distance education, we do discussion questions, and students have really got up to here with discussion questions. But the real reason for a discussion question that's a good question is that it makes you think through the content that you've learned and then apply it. And I think that that's the real hook with gamification, if you're actually helping people apply the content. So when you're ready to put together a course of information, do you think it's better to deliver the content in a gaming or gamified way? Or is it just, it's okay to still do, some sort of traditional delivery method, whether it's online or face-to-face, and then make them apply it in gaming or gamification?
yeah,
What do you think?
no, that's that's hitting down into more the accessory level, and so it's powerful and easier in the initial stages, because the 3 and the 4 takes a lot of design, thinking through, planning. But so down here, the accessory, then it's easy. So let's go over here, learn something, come over here. The danger is that breaking that magic circle is, are they going to keep coming back and staying engaged? But yeah, certainly.
But is the novelty wear off? Is that what you're saying? Too much gaming is,
Yeah,
that's what it
yeah,
is?
yeah. Yeah, because we've left the magic circle and then we come over here to it. So that's, and again, that's getting into the weeds. It's better to be better to have it than not to have it, obviously. There was something you were saying that caused a thought in my head, and I was going to cycle back to it. Now I can't.
So,
Yeah,
the application,
but
the information, or
information.
it's so
But
much
good.
what, that we're all trying to do is, so much of what happens in training and education is that we train people up to a certain point, then we let them loose. And so the next step is the research that says, well, did they actually apply the information? Did it transfer on the job? That's that's the real question. And so seldom are there evaluations or follow-up studies, or an administrator doesn't even know what their people learned during the training. They just know that they went to training, and if they didn't take it, how do they know whether or not they're applying it? So I think that's another step. So really, with gamification, then how do you test that? How do you know it transferred to the job? What do you recommend to people to do?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I remembered what I wanted to say, so I'll say it really quickly. Professor Egan, what he did is his avatar, he doesn't look anything like that avatar. He's very round, but his avatar, he stayed in character inside the discussion groups, inside the forum groups. And so they talked to this interesting guy. So he drank weird juices, the character did. And so that's how they stayed in the game, interacting with him on those types of things. The measurement, one of the things that we attempt to do is to have folks engaged. Our goal would be to never have another quiz or test, that the game mechanics themselves demonstrate knowledge. And so by working through the game, if you will, that demonstrates that, yes, I remember, I know, and more importantly, I do. So, and again, with technology, we're going to get into the simulations and so on will be much more accessible than they are now. But instead of just passive learning, now they take what they learned and through the game mechanics demonstrate that they learned it. So, because testing, as we all know, that just reveals working memory. It doesn't mean they actually apply it to anything. So, but if we have to engage with the information in some way, then we can notice that, yes, this person is doing these things. And so that's more difficult to do in asynchronous, totally electronic, but it's a little easier to do if we're somehow face-to-face virtually or not. Sometimes it gets a little easier to see how they're engaging.
I think it's a real sales point for using this as an instructional strategy, because that's what it is. And you define all the different levels. Each one of these has a set of instructional strategies that goes with it. And people are constantly coming up with new ideas and ways of applying it. So as an instructional designer, getting, as you said, getting into the weeds is what the fun part is how do I actually take everything I know about instructional design and then wrap it up in gamification and throw it over where I can start really using it that way. And because let's face it, I mean, universities, federal governments, agencies, there's not a lot of money being spent on training or education. There's a lot of money being paid in tuition. But when it gets to the point where we're actually designing the courses, I mean, one of the things that we're going to be doing in the future is how to help people who are not instructional designers, but are instructional designers by assignment, which means I don't have a clue what instructional design is or any information about education, but I'm a subject matter expert. And so my job is to essentially transfer what I know into a course. And in doing that, people usually revert to the person who taught them most of their work. And so they do the same sort of passive way of learning, and they just, we just keep transmitting this old style. I mean, it's not conversational. It's not what like we're doing today or trying to get at the meat of something. It's just transmission. I've got a set of yellow pages from 100 years ago, and I'm just going to keep reading it until I drop dead. Well, that's productive. So,
yeah, so true.
Jonathan and Carla, about a minute left in the webinar.
Okay, that went by fast.
Yeah,
It
did.
Well, seeing no more questions in the Q&A, then let me thank you, John, for being here today. This was a makeup session. A couple of months ago, we had this scheduled, and John wasn't able to make it at the very, very last minute because of some other unforeseen consequences, grabbing planes and so forth. So, John, thank you for rescheduling with us today and being with us. And we'd certainly like to do a much longer webinar seminar with you. We're going to reinvent the old GLTS, Government Learning Technology Symposium, and we're going to start doing longer conference calls, audio conferencing, video conferencing. With Russ's help, we're going to be doing all sorts of things. So, John, thank you so much. And Russ, I'd like to thank you again for being the wonderful sponsor that you are, and our thanks to Zoom. And for that, I'd like to thank you all for being with us today. It's been wonderful. Thank you for your participation. And with that, we'll conclude the webinar. Good afternoon.